What's up guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you're doing good. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the best weapons that you can use to conquer the new biome, the Ashlands. There's a lot of talk about the difficulty of this new biome, and hopefully in this video, we can alleviate some of that concern. So let's jump into it. So first and foremost, I want to say that in order to have the most pleasurable experience out of the Ashlands, I highly recommend using magic. It might not be how a ton of players play the game, but magic being a thing that you get access to in the Mistlands just makes sense that it would be useful in the next biome in the progression. So I actually recommend making basically all of the magic items you have access to in the Mistlands. The Staff of Frost, the Staff of Embers, the Staff of Protection, and the Dead Razor, along with the full Ether Weave set of armor for that added Ether regen. I also play this build with Yggdrasil Porridge and Seeker Aspic and Mushroom Omelette, just to maximize the amount of ether we have access to whilst also having enough stamina to run around. I also recommend taking a bow, specifically the Spine Snap bow, plus a bunch of frost arrows. And it's also good to have a Carapace buckler for your shield as well, and pair that with a Mist Walker. And last but not least, the Demolisher. So that's the summary of everything I recommend to take with you. So I'm now going to break down why each of these items is useful. Oh, by the way, just as a side note as well, I think the Feather Cape is also still a good choice, even though it makes you weak to fire, because you can avoid most of the fire damage. And it's also recently had a buff in that it actually increases your jump height and decreases your jump stamina usage. So this cape is now extra useful when trying to jump up and get into some spots where you're unreachable by mobs, which is gonna be helpful in the Ashlands. So let's start out with the Staff of Frost, because I do kind of feel like it's the star of the show in this loadout. So this staff I think is easy to sleep on because at range it's not very accurate because it has a very wide spread. But with this loadout, we're basically using the Staff of Frost when enemies start to get pretty close, and we're almost using it just like a shotgun or a machine gun that we're just pulling out to spray enemies when they get too close. And because of the slowing effect of Frost, it will also almost stop enemies completely in their track, which allows you to do a lot more damage before they get too close. It might not seem like an individual hit does a lot of damage, but the DPS on this weapon is absolutely insane when they're close enough for every piece of frost to actually connect. Also, it's worth noting that enemies in water, once they get wet, are actually weak to frost. So luring enemies into water and then shooting them is also a legit strat with this weapon as well. Now, at range, the Staff of Embers is actually a little bit better because you can actually get pretty accurate with this weapon, and it still does a lot of damage to these enemies. Even though we're in the Ashlands, which is like the land of fire, the Staff of Embers, this explosion is still very good. You just end up having to sort of aim way above things to counteract the drop of the projectile. But when it hits, it deals a lot of damage. And when enemies get a little too close, sometimes this isn't the best weapon to finish off with because it does have a higher ether usage, which is why it's good to switch over to the Staff of Frost up close. And also that slowing effect just makes it easier to not get hit with the Staff of Frost as well. So Staff of Embers at range, Staff of Frost up close. The Staff of Embers also has a pretty large area of effect on those projectiles, so that's actually useful for taking on groups of enemies. And you can even use the Staff of Embers to take out spawners or take out turrets, which is extremely useful when clearing out the biome in general. Now, before you actually get into danger, I recommend summoning both skeletons with the Dead Razor and then casting Staff of Protection, so you get protection on yourself and protection on your skeletons. Now, the skeletons aren't going to deal a whole lot of damage, but they will distract the enemies, and whilst they're distracted, you can get a lot of damage in with your ranged magic before the enemies start to turn on you. So the skeletons that you summon can be a very good distraction. And that Staff of Protection just gives you that extra little bit of safety, and it's going to reduce your incoming DPS by a lot because it will tank quite a bit of damage. And just remember that when this eventually does get broken or gets worn out, just get to safety, clear out any nearby enemies, and then just cast it again if you need to summon your skellies again. But if you take this very slowly but surely, and just gradually pick off enemies one at a time, you're going to end up with a few moments to breathe where you can summon your skellies and get your protection bubble up and then get back into the action. Now, the Spine Snap bow is for those moments where you're low on ether and you're trying to finish off enemies or pick them off at range before they get too close. And specifically, the Spine Snap actually deals spirit damage. And because the Charred are actually all undead, they're actually weak to this, which makes the Spine Snap an excellent choice. You'll notice the sort of white flame burning effect. That is a sign of spirit damage being in action. But pairing this with the Frost Arrow is also good because of that slowing effect. Sometimes if you're spraying someone with your Staff of Frost and they start to get a little close, then you run out of ether and you can switch to your bow, shoot them with a Frost Arrow and continue running, and then turn back and either finish them off with a bow or change back to the Staff of Frost. Silver Arrows do also work good because of the spirit damage, but there's not enough of a difference between Frost Arrows and Silver Arrows. Silver's a little bit more of a grind. And also, I'd still think Frost Arrows are a little bit better because of the slowing effect. Speaking of running out of ether, I do also recommend on bringing several stacks of minor ether mead, major health potions, and medium stamina mead, just for any of those moments where you're low on any of those three things and you need to refill in a pinch. If you take it slow, you use the protection bubble and you use the dead razor and you do everything that I'm saying, you should end up with enough downtime to pop these potions during the fight. Now, we've already mentioned spirit damage with the Charred being undead, and so that's why we actually go with the Mistwalker. The Mistwalker is a really good weapon to make, and because it's a one-handed weapon, we can pair it with a Carapace Buckler, which is going to allow you to get those parries in. And with this loadout, it's sort of a last resort, but in those moments where you're not going to be able to pick them off with the bow or with a staff, switching over to a Mistwalker still works really good because of that spirit damage. Now, I would definitely avoid fighting melee with some of the larger enemies if you struggle with dodging and stuff, but taking out some of the more minor Charred enemies, the Mistwalker still works great. And in a pinch, you can use it against anything in this biome, but I'm trying to advise you a way to play safe just because it is a more difficult biome. And I think this playstyle anyone can do. And lastly, the reason we take the Demolisher is just for those moments where you're out of ether and you just end up surrounded and there is a lot of enemies close by. The Demolisher does just have a large area of effect, and it does have a pushback effect as well. So you can just use like one Demolisher slam just to push enemies you far back enough that you can perhaps start running away, or just give you enough time to quickly use that health potion or stamina potion or whatever. And also don't forget the Demolisher does actually clip through things. Its area of effect clips through stuff. So if you're just surrounded by objects or rocks or trees, or maybe standing at the edge of a fortress, using that Demolisher can just be some useful crowd control. It doesn't do enough damage in this biome to be the go-to to use all of the time, but just whipping it out in a pinch, especially to finish off some enemies. Maybe you've managed to like wear down a group of enemies to be relatively low HP and you just want to finish them all off at once. This is a good way to do that. So these are all of the weapons. This is the loadout that I recommend everybody start off with going into the Ashlands in order to have the smoothest experience. I do still consider this to be generally the most effective loadout you can enter the biome with, just because it's incredibly consistent and pretty easy actually if you take your time with it. But of course, you do unlock a bunch of new weapons as you progress through the Ashlands. And when it comes to that stuff, there's a few ways you can improve this loadout. So the first thing to say is you are going to unlock more Golden Table and more Black Forge upgrades in this biome. And so if you do those, you can actually further upgrade all of the items that you brought with you, and of course any new items you make and unlock in this biome as well. We've got the Trousers of Embler and that whole armor set that you could make to replace the Ether Weave set to give you more ether regeneration, which is very useful with a magic loadout. Also, this new set gives you so much ether regen that actually you could pair it with a flame metal helmet just for the extra armor. The Asphyn Cloak is useful anywhere because it increases your run speed when you're going in the direction of the wind and reduces the stamina usage of dodging. And the Ashen Cape is also useful in any scenario as well because it reduces your stamina usage whilst attacking and blocking which is probably the one I would upgrade to. When it comes to new magic weapons, you could add in the Staff of Fracturing for some more ranged options. And the Troll Staff is not super practical, but it does cause a lot of chaos. The undead trolls it spawns can do a lot of damage and draw a lot of attention off you, more so than the skellies that you raise with the Dead Razor. The only problem is they will turn on you, although they will get defeated eventually. So yeah, neither of these magic additions are necessarily a massive improvement to the previous magic loadout, but they are some useful additions if you want to try it out that are very fun. The Primal Berserker axes are also very clutch for one-on-one fights, especially if combined with the Ashen Cape, which reduces the stamina usage of attacks. And the reason I say the Primal Axe is good for one-on-one is because there's a 20% chance that attacking with this weapon immobilizes an enemy, and because they're high DPS, that means that 20% chance is even more likely to happen because it's 20% per hit and you're getting a lot more hits in. And this strategy is very effective against the new mini boss, which I should be able to show a clip of if you don't believe me. But yeah, one-on-one fights, this immobilization effect is very good. Other than that, everything else that I recommended coming into this biome with does just remain effective because there's not a lot of new spirit damage options in the Ashlands, and the magic staffs that you get from the Mistlands are very effective. Just remember that leveling up any of your magic skills related to these weapons will be very, very useful. If you can get to around 30 plus, that's great. More is even better. And yeah, just take your time and you'll be fine. But that's just about going to do it for this video. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and a nice positive comment for the YouTube algorithm, and also smash subscribe for future content. I do stream live on this very YouTube channel and also live on Twitch at twitch.tv/NickRawcliffe, so leave a link in the description if you're interested in that. You can support the content over on Patreon at patreon.com/NickRawcliffe, so leave a link in the description if you're interested in that as well. You can follow me on social media and join my Discord at the links below. And until next time, have a good one.